I am Tiana Washington, 29 years old, and last night my sister tried to kill me with a birthday cake. Most people think of family as a safety net, but in the high-stakes world of Atlanta, elite blood is not thicker than water. It is just harder to clean off the Persian rugs. Before I tell you how a simple X-ray revealed a conspiracy that would send my entire family to prison, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to survive the people who were supposed to love you. The evening had started like every other event at my parents' Buckhead estate, a performative display of wealth designed to impress my father's, patience, and my mother's church group. I stood near the center of the ballroom, feeling like an imposter in my own life. My mother Vivian had spent weeks planning this party, not to celebrate my birthday, but to show off her new interior decor. I was just a prop, the quiet forensic accountant daughter who paled in comparison to her golden child. The jazz band lowered their volume as the double doors swung open. My sister Jasmine made her grand entrance. She held a massive three-tiered cake, the candlelight dancing in her eyes. At 32, Jasmine was a social media sensation, flawless and adored, but as she walked toward me, I saw the malice behind her smile. Her husband, Connor, trailed behind her, swirling his scotch and checking his watch, clearly bored by the prospect of celebrating anyone other than himself. "Make a wish," Tiana Jasmine said, her voice sugary sweet but loud enough for the back of the room to hear. I leaned in, closing my eyes, genuinely wishing for a promotion at work so I could finally afford to move far away from their toxicity. I never got to blow out the candles. I felt Jasmine's hands clamp onto the back of my neck. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin with shocking force. "Happy birthday, loser," she hissed. It was not a playful shove. It was a calculated, violent slam. She drove my head down with all her weight. I expected the soft give of sponge and buttercream, but my face collided with something rock-hard hidden within the layers. A sickening crunch echoed through the silent room, a sound so loud it drowned out the jazz music. It was the sound of my orbital bones shattering. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded behind my eyes. I crumpled to the floor, the metallic taste of blood instantly filling my mouth, mixing with the cloying sweetness of vanilla frosting. As I lay there gasping for air, vision swimming in a sea of red and white, I waited for the screams of horror. I waited for my mother to rush to my side. Instead, through the ringing in my ears, I heard the one thing that hurt more than my broken face. I heard my family laughing. I landed hard on the cold marble, the impact reverberating through my spine like a shockwave. The world spun in a nauseating blur of crystal chandeliers and expensive silk. I tried to push myself up, but my hand slipped in the mess of vanilla frosting and sponge cake that now coated the floor. Then came the warmth. A thick metallic liquid gushed from my nose, streaming down my chin and dripping onto the pristine white icing that clung to my dress. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but my left eye would not open. It was swollen shut, pulsating with a rhythm that matched the frantic beating of my heart. Blood began to pool around my head, a stark crimson stain spreading across the expensive Persian rug my mother loved more than she ever loved me. I waited for the rush of footsteps. I waited for someone, anyone, to drop to their knees and check if I was breathing, but there was only a collective gasp, followed by an unsettling murmur. These were the pillars of the Atlanta community: deacons, doctors, lawyers, people who prided themselves on their charity work. Yet they stared at me like I was a stain that needed to be removed, not a human being in agony. Someone in the back giggled, a nervous, high-pitched sound that seemed to give permission for the rest of the room to relax. "Oh my God, look at her face." Jasmine's voice cut through the haze, but there was no concern in it, only manic glee. She loomed over me, blocking out the light from the chandelier. In her hand, her latest phone was already recording, the red light blinking like a baleful eye. "Say hi to the live stream, Tiana. You are going viral tonight." She laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that I had heard in my nightmares since I was 5 years old. "It is just a little cake, drama queen. Stop acting like you are dying." She zoomed in the camera lens inches from my bleeding face, capturing every drop of blood and every tremor of pain for her 2 million followers. She was framing this as a clumsy accident, a funny blooper reel moment, while I lay there choking on blood and buttercream. Through the gap in the crowd, I saw Connor. My brother-in-law stood by the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a crystal flute of vintage champagne. He did not flinch. He did not look away. He watched me writhe in pain with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a lab rat. His eyes, usually so charming when he was soliciting investors for his hedge fund, were now void of any humanity. He took a slow sip of his wine, his gaze locking with mine for a terrifying second. There was no pity there, only a chilling annoyance, as if my bleeding was an inconvenience to his evening schedule. In that moment, looking at the man my sister married, I realized this was not just a prank gone wrong. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating, charged with a malice that went far beyond sibling rivalry. The footsteps stopped inches from my face. Through the red haze clouding my vision, I saw the hem of my mother's gold-embroidered gown shimmering under the chandelier light. For a split second, a foolish, desperate part of me thought she was finally going to act like a mother. I thought she would drop to her knees and scream for an ambulance. I thought she would cradle my head and demand to know why Jasmine had hurt me. I prepared myself for the comfort of her touch, waiting for her to pull me into her arms. Instead, I felt the sharp point of a stiletto dig into my thigh. It was not a stumble. It was a deliberate nudge. A kick. "Get up this instant, Tiana." Her voice was a low hiss vibrating with a fury that had nothing to do with my well-being. "Look at what you are doing to my floor. This is an antique Persian silk rug, Tiana. Do you have any idea how impossible blood is to remove from silk?" She was not looking at my shattered face. She was looking at the dark crimson stains spreading beneath me, with the horror one might reserve for a spilled glass of red wine, not a hemorrhaging child. I tried to push myself up, but the room tilted violently, the floor feeling like the deck of a ship in a storm. My left eye felt heavy, tight, and incredibly hot. I tried to blink it open, but the eyelid would not respond. It was swollen shut, sealed by trauma and drying blood. Panic clawed at my throat. I could only see out of my right eye, and even that vision was blurring gray at the edges. A headache unlike anything I had ever experienced roared to life in my skull. It was not just a throb. It felt like a sledgehammer was being taken to the inside of my cranium with every beat of my heart. The nausea returned, rolling through my stomach in sickening waves that made me gag. "Stop making a scene," Vivian Washington snapped, her voice raising just enough for the nearby guests to hear her annoyance but not her cruelty. "You always have to make everything about you, do not you. Jasmine plans a beautiful party and you just have to ruin it with your clumsiness. Get up and go to the bathroom. Clean yourself up before you embarrass us any further." She turned to the guests, flashing a bright, apologetic smile that did not reach her eyes. "So sorry, everyone. Tiana has always been a bit theatrical. Please enjoy the hors d'oeuvres while she fixes her makeup." Theatrical. My orbital bone was crushed, my nose was broken, and my own mother was calling it a performance. I looked up at her towering figure, blurred and distorted by my injury. She looked like a monster in a designer dress. There was no love in her eyes, only a cold calculation of how my injury would affect her social standing. The pain in my head spiked a white-hot lance of agony that made me gasp, but the pain in my chest was worse. This was the woman who gave birth to me. This was the woman who was supposed to protect me. And as I lay bleeding at her feet, she was worried about the dry cleaning bill. I realized then with a terrifying clarity that I was entirely alone in a room full of people. If I did not get myself up off this floor, I was going to die here, and my mother would probably complain that my corpse was cluttering up her party. I dragged my body across the cold marble, leaving a trail of red smears behind me. My vision was tunneling the edges of the room, fading into darkness, but I locked my good eye on the one person who could save me. My father stood near the patio doors, holding court with 3 other men in expensive suits. Dr. Marcus Washington was a legend in Atlanta. He rebuilt faces shattered by car accidents. He corrected congenital defects with the precision of an artist. He was a healer. Surely the man who had spent his life fixing broken things would not ignore his own broken daughter. Dad. I croaked the word bubbling up through a throat thick with copper and sugar. I reached out my hand trembling as I grasped the hem of his tailored trousers. He stiffened not with concern, but with the irritation of someone who had just had a drink spilled on them. He turned slowly, excusing himself from his conversation with a tight professional smile before looking down at me. I expected him to drop his glass. I expected him to yell for ice to check my pupil response to palpate the bone. I expected him to be a doctor. Dad, I cannot see. I whispered, tears mixing with the blood on my cheeks. I think my nose is broken. I am so dizzy. The room is spinning. Please help me. Marcus did not kneel. He did not touch me. Instead, he lifted his left arm and made a show of checking his gold Rolex. The diamonds on the watch face glinted under the chandelier light, mocking me with their brilliance. He sighed a short exhale of air through his nose that signaled his patience was at an end. Tiana, pull yourself together, he said, his voice low and devoid of any warmth. You are being hysterical. It is just a nosebleed. Do not let my partners see you like this. We are closing a deal on the new surgical center tonight. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't assessing my injury. He was assessing the damage I was doing to his business deal. To him, I wasn't a patient in critical condition. I was a liability. I was a stain on his reputation, an unsightly blemish that needed to be airbrushed away. Go to the guest bathroom down the hall, he commanded, pointing a manicured finger away from the party. The one near the kitchen. Use the service entrance so no one else sees you. Wash your face, stop crying, and for God's sake do not bleed on the towels. Use paper. He turned back to his partners, his face instantly transforming back into the charming, benevolent surgeon the world adored. Sorry about that, gentlemen, I heard him say as I lay there. My youngest daughter has always been a bit clumsy. Now about the zoning permits. The coldness of his rejection cut deeper than the shard of diamond embedded in my sinus. My mother cared about her rug. My father cared about his deal. Neither of them cared that I might be dying on their floor. As I watched him laugh at a joke, clinking his glass with a man who could fund his next clinic, something inside me shattered more completely than my orbital bone. I realized that the doctor was gone. The father was gone. All that was left was a man who loved his reflection more than his flesh and blood. I was on my own. I had to get up, not to save face, but to save myself. I forced my body to move. Getting up from the floor required every ounce of strength I had left. The room swayed violently as I stumbled toward the service hallway, my hand dragging along the wall for support. I left a long, smeared trail of red on the expensive cream wallpaper. I hoped my mother would see it. I hoped it would never wash out. I made it to the guest bathroom and threw the lock, collapsing against the heavy wood. The silence in the small tiled room was deafening compared to the jazz and laughter outside. I dragged myself to the sink, gripping the cold porcelain to pull myself upright. When I looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back at me. The left side of my face was a swollen purple ruin. My eye was completely gone, buried under angry, distended flesh that pulsed with its own heartbeat. My nose was shifted sickeningly to the right, unnatural and wrong. Blood was still pouring from it, coating my chin and neck, soaking into the bodice of my silk dress. I looked like a monster. I looked like a victim of a brutal assault, not a birthday girl. I reached for a towel, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold on to the counter. Then a wave of nausea hit me so hard my knees buckled. It was not the normal dizziness of a concussion. It felt like my insides were boiling. My stomach cramped violently, a searing pain that doubled me over. I barely got my head over the basin before I retched. I vomited until there was nothing left, but the heaving did not stop. It felt like my body was trying to expel something deep and rotten. My throat burned with acid. My head pounded with a rhythm that felt like it would crack my skull open. I did not know it then, but this was not just shock. It was not just the trauma of my sister slamming my face into a table. This was my body screaming. This was a biological revolt against months of heavy metal poisoning. My system was rejecting the toxicity that had been fed to me with a smile. I gasped for air, clutching the sink, staring at the mess. I turned on the faucet, splashing freezing water onto my face, but it just turned pink and swirled away. The bleeding would not stop. Every time I touched my nose, fresh bright red blood poured out. I felt cold, a bone-deep chill that made my teeth chatter uncontrollably. I looked at the pristine white hand towels my mother had embroidered with the family crest. My father had told me to use paper. He told me not to ruin the linens. With a trembling hand, I grabbed the thickest, fluffiest monogram towel and pressed it to my face. I watched the white cotton turn crimson and felt a tiny dark satisfaction. I was dying in their guest bathroom, and all they cared about was the laundry. I knew then that if I stayed in this house, I would never leave. Through the heavy oak door, the sounds of the party filtered in like a nightmare I could not wake up from. The jazz band had started playing a lively, upbeat number completely at odds with the carnage in the bathroom. Above the saxophone, I heard my sister's voice, shrill and amused. "She is just doing this for attention," Jasmine announced, her words slurring slightly with champagne. "She will come out in a minute pretending she has a concussion. It is pathetic, really." A chorus of sycophantic laughter followed her declaration. They believed her. They actually believed that I had smashed my own face into a cake and was now hiding in the bathroom as a performance. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were not coming to check on me. They were not calling an ambulance. If I passed out in here from blood loss or the brain bleed I suspected I had, they would leave me on the cold tile floor until the last guest had departed. My father would probably stitch me up on the kitchen table to avoid a police report, and my mother would worry about the upholstery in the car. If I stayed in this house tonight, I was going to die. The thought was not dramatic or hysterical. It was a cold, hard fact. I was bleeding, concussed, and surrounded by people who viewed my existence as an inconvenience. I had to get out. I reached for the door handle, but my hand froze. If I walked out there, they would stop me. They would drag me upstairs to a guest room and lock the door to protect their image. I could not drive. My left eye was useless, and the room spun every time I moved my head too fast. My keys were in my purse, which was still sitting on a chair in the ballroom. I turned to the window. It was a small, frosted glass rectangle high above the toilet, designed for ventilation rather than egress. It was my only chance. I climbed onto the toilet lid, my legs shaking violently. I unlatched the window and pushed it open. The night air rushed in cool and crisp against my burning skin. I hoisted myself up the movement, sending fresh waves of agony through my skull. I squeezed my shoulders through the narrow opening, the rough stucco of the exterior wall scraping my arms. I kicked my heels off, letting them clatter to the bathroom floor. I wiggled my hips through, gasping as my ribs compressed against the frame. With a final shove, I tumbled out into the darkness. Gravity took over and I fell 6 feet down. I did not land on soft grass. I crashed directly into my mother's prize-winning rose bushes. Thorns the size of shark teeth tore into my skin, shredding the silk of my dress and slicing into my arms and legs. One particularly long thorn raked across my cheek, adding a fresh line of fire to my battered face. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming, tasting fresh blood. I lay there in the dirt for a moment, entangled in the branches, the smell of damp earth and expensive fertilizer filling my nose. Inside the house, the music swelled. No one had heard me fall. I rolled out of the bushes, pulling thorns from my skin with trembling fingers. I forced myself to stand, using the brick wall for support. The world tilted on its axis, but I gritted my teeth and focused on the gate at the end of the driveway. I stuck to the shadows of the manicured hedges, limping past the rows of luxury cars belonging to the guests who were currently eating my birthday cake. I slipped through the pedestrian gate and stumbled onto the asphalt of the main road. The neighborhood was silent, the massive estates looming like fortresses in the dark. I was alone, barefoot and bleeding, walking away from the only home I had ever known, and for the first time in my life, I did not look back. I fumbled for my phone with shaking, blood-slicked hands. The screen illuminated the dark street, revealing the horror of my condition in its harsh blue light. My dress was in tatters. My face was a mask of crimson, and I was shivering violently in the cool night air. I tapped the Uber app, my vision blurring so badly I had to close my left eye entirely to focus. I selected the nearest hospital intentionally, bypassing the private clinic where my father was chief of surgery. I couldn't risk him intercepting me. I couldn't risk him burying my medical records to save his reputation. I needed a place where I was just a patient, not a liability. A black sedan pulled up to the curb 5 minutes later. The driver, an older man with graying hair and kind eyes, rolled down the window. When he saw me, his eyes widened in genuine alarm. "Oh my God, miss," he gasped, unlocking the doors immediately. "Are you okay? Do you need me to call the police?" I shook my head, climbing into the back seat and curling into a ball. "Just the hospital, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Just drive." He didn't ask any more questions. He just nodded, his face grim, and pulled away from the curb with a speed that told me he understood the urgency. As the car sped through the winding streets of Buckhead, the adrenaline that had fueled my escape began to fade, replaced by a crushing exhaustion. The pain in my head was a constant throbbing roar. My stomach churned, the aftershocks of the poisoning I didn't yet understand, racking my body with tremors. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of yellow. My phone buzzed in my hand, a relentless vibration that felt like an accusation. I looked down at the screen. "Where are you hiding?" The message from my mother read, "Stop being dramatic and come back inside. The guests are waiting for the cake cutting. You are ruining everything." Another buzz, this one from Jasmine. "LOL, did you run away? You are such a child. Mom is furious. You better have a good excuse." I let the phone slip from my fingers onto the seat. Their words, once capable of cutting me to the bone, now felt distant, like static on a radio. I was dying, and they were worried about the cake. I was bleeding out in the back of a stranger's car, and they were annoyed that I wasn't there to pose for photos. The realization brought a strange, cold comfort. I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not my obedience, not my silence, not my life. My eyelids grew heavy, the world fading to black. I fought to stay awake, terrified that if I closed my eyes, I wouldn't open them again. But the darkness was relentless, pulling me down into a deep, silent void. The last thing I heard was the driver's voice, panicked and far away. Miss, stay with me. We are almost there." Then there was nothing but the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the fading glow of my mother's angry texts. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing that pierced the darkness. It was a steady, relentless sound that dragged me back from the void. I opened my right eye, the left one refusing to budge under the weight of swelling and dried blood. The harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room assaulted my senses, making my skull throb with a ferocity that stole my breath. I smelled rubbing alcohol and latex, the scent of sterile desperation. I tried to lift my hand to touch my face, but a firm grip gently pushed my arm back down to the bed. "Stay still," a voice commanded. It was calm, but laced with an authority that brooked no argument. "You have suffered a significant head trauma. Do not try to move." My vision cleared enough to focus on the man standing over me. He was Asian American, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a jaw set in grim determination. His white coat identified him as Dr. Kim. He didn't look at me with the pity I usually saw in people's eyes when I was hurt. He looked at me with the intensity of a detective examining a crime scene. He was assessing me, calculating, searching for truths I wasn't ready to speak. "Can you tell me what happened, Tiana?" he asked, his pen hovering over a clipboard. The lie came automatically, a reflex honed over 29 years of protecting the Washington family image. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, warning me never to air our dirty laundry, never to let the cracks show. I couldn't tell this stranger that my famous sister had smashed my face into a table while my parents watched. I couldn't ruin my father's reputation. I fell. I croaked, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. I was running down the stairs in my heels. I tripped and hit my face on the banister. It was just an accident. I am clumsy. Dr. Kim did not write anything down. He did not nod. He simply stared at me for a long, uncomfortable silence. Then, without a word, he reached out and gently took my left arm. He pushed up the sleeve of the hospital gown, exposing the skin I had carefully hidden for days. There, fading but still visible, were 3 distinct yellowish-green bruises. They were the shape of fingertips, a souvenir from when Jasmine had grabbed me last week to scream at me about her credit card bill. "Stairs do not leave fingerprint bruises on your upper arm," Dr. Kim said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And banisters do not cause the kind of impact trauma I am seeing on your face. That was a direct blunt force impact. I have worked in this ER for 12 years. I know the difference between a clumsy fall and an assault. You are lying to protect someone, but right now you need to worry about protecting yourself." He dropped my arm and turned to the nurse standing by the door. His demeanor shifted instantly from investigator to commander. "Get her to imaging immediately. I want a full CT scan of the cranium and facial bones. And get a toxicology screen. Her pupil response is sluggish and her skin tone is off. This isn't just a concussion." "Wait." I tried to protest, panic flaring in my chest. "I just want to go home. Please do not do this." Dr. Kim leaned over me, his face inches from mine. "You are not going anywhere, Tiana. Because whatever did this to you didn't just break bones. I think it did something much worse. And I am not letting you leave this hospital until I know exactly what it is. Move her, now." The waiting was a special kind of torture. I lay on the gurney, the thin hospital sheet offering no warmth against the chill that seemed to radiate from my own bones. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only thing tethering me to reality. Every time the automatic doors hissed open, my heart jumped, terrifying me that it might be my parents coming to drag me back to the estate, to hush me up and hide me away, until my face healed enough to be presentable. But it was only nurses rushing past with charts and IV bags. The isolation was suffocating. I was safe from my family for the moment, but I was trapped with the terrifying unknown of my own body. Finally, the door to my bay slid open. Dr. Kim walked back in. The brisk professional energy he had carried earlier was gone, replaced by a heavy, ominous silence. He didn't look at his clipboard. He didn't check the monitors. He looked straight at me, his expression unreadable but deeply unsettling. Without a word, he walked over to the wall-mounted light box and snapped a large film into place. The harsh white light flickered to life, illuminating the ghostly translucent landscape of my skull. The contrast between the black background and the white bone was stark, a map of my pain displayed for everyone to see. Dr. Kim stepped aside so I could see clearly. Even without a medical degree, the devastation was undeniable. The left side of my face looked like a cracked eggshell. He raised a pen and pointed to the area surrounding my eye socket. "Do you see this, Tiana?" he asked, his voice devoid of any comforting bedside manner. "This is called an orbital blowout fracture. The floor of your eye socket has completely collapsed. The bone that is supposed to hold your eye in place has been pulverized. Your eye is not just swollen, it is sinking into the sinus cavity below because the structural integrity of your face has been destroyed." I stared at the image, bile rising in my throat. That was my face. That was the bone structure my father used to brag about, now reduced to jagged shards and splintered fragments. It looked less like an injury and more like a demolition site. He turned to face me, his eyes hard. "A fall down the stairs does not do this, Tiana. A fall creates impact points that are distributed. This is a concentrated high-velocity strike directly to the ocular region. This is the kind of injury I see when someone takes a baseball bat to the face or hits a dashboard at 60 miles an hour. Whatever hit you did not just bump you, it crushed solid bone like it was paper. He turned back to the scan, his gaze shifting to the center of my skull. But the fracture is not the most disturbing thing on this film. He leaned in closer, his finger tracing a path through the dark void of my nasal cavity. There was something there. A bright, stark white shape that stood out against the gray tissue and black air pockets. It shone on the X-ray like a star in the night sky, a dense foreign object that had no business being inside a human head. It was lodged deep, wedged tight against the delicate cartilage of my septum. Dr. Kim looked back at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something that looked like horror in his eyes. He wasn't just analyzing a patient anymore. He was looking at a crime scene. "Tiana," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled me to the marrow. "You need to look very closely at your nasal sinus. Because what is stuck inside your head right now makes it impossible for this to be an accident. What I am seeing here changes everything. There is a metallic foreign object lodged deep within your ethmoid sinus," Dr. Kim said, his voice slicing through the silence of the exam room like a scalpel. He tapped the glowing screen where the blinding white artifact sat, like a star in the darkness of my skull. It was not a bone fragment. It was not a clot. It was dense and faceted with sharp geometric edges that caught the digital light. I squinted at the monitor with my good eye, trying to make sense of the shape. A wave of nausea rolled through me as recognition set in. It was a diamond. Specifically, it was a 3-carat princess-cut diamond. "That is my sister's engagement ring," I whispered, the realization making the room spin. Jasmine never took that ring off. It was her pride and joy, a symbol of the wealthy status she projected to the world. I remembered the weight of her hand on the back of my neck just before the impact. I remembered the cold bite of metal against my skin right before she slammed my face down. Dr. Kim turned to me, his expression grim. "Tiana, do you understand the physics of what we are looking at here? A diamond is the hardest substance on Earth. For this stone to be dislodged from its platinum setting, travel through the soft tissue of your nose, pierce the septal cartilage, and embed itself into the ethmoid bone, the force of impact had to be catastrophic. This does not happen from a fall. This does not happen from a trip on the stairs." He walked over to the bed, his demeanor shifting from doctor to detective. This was a high-velocity impact. The ring essentially acted as a brass knuckle. When your head hit the cake, the force was so violent that the setting gave way and the stone became a projectile. It acted like a bullet. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was a targeted, powerful strike. Gravity cannot generate this specific kind of penetrating trauma. Only a person can. I raised a trembling hand to the bandage on my nose. I could feel the throbbing pulse of the injury, but now I felt something else. I felt the violation. A piece of Jasmine, and a piece of her vanity and her hatred, was literally buried inside my skull. It was not just an injury anymore. It was an invasion. She had hit me so hard she had left a piece of herself behind as a souvenir of her cruelty. "This changes everything," Dr. Kim said, moving to the counter to type rapidly into his computer. "This is no longer just a medical case. This is forensic evidence. We are going to have to surgically remove that stone, and when we do, it is going straight into an evidence bag. It is undeniable proof of assault with a deadly weapon. Your sister did not just prank you, Tiana. She attacked you with enough force to drive a rock through bone." He looked back at me, his eyes fierce. "You cannot protect them anymore. The X-ray does not lie. An accident does not put a diamond in your sinus cavity. A monster does." Dr. Kim was not finished with the light box. He pulled down the image of my shattered face and replaced it with a full body scan that had been taken during the initial trauma assessment. He zoomed in on my lower legs, specifically the tibia, the large bone of the shin. I watched him trace a series of faint transverse white bands that ran horizontally across the bone shaft like the rungs of a ghostly ladder. They were subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but to him they were screaming a message louder than any scream I could muster. "Do you see these lines, Tiana?" he asked, tapping the screen with a rhythmic intensity. In medicine, we call these Harris lines. They are growth arrest lines. They appear when the body is under such extreme metabolic stress that bone growth temporarily stops because the system is diverting all its energy just to keep the vital organs functioning. We usually see them in cases of severe malnutrition or pediatric trauma. But in a healthy 29-year-old woman with access to food and shelter, they suggest something much more sinister. I shook my head, confusion warring with the pain in my face. I did not understand what my legs had to do with my sister smashing my head in. I thought maybe it was from stress at work. I had been tired lately. So tired. Dr. Kim turned to me, and the look in his eyes was no longer just professional concern. It was fear. "Tiana, these lines are dense. They are calcified deposits that happen when the body is fighting off a systemic invader. Combined with your symptoms, the nausea you felt earlier, the vomiting that was not just from the concussion, the tremors I saw in your hands before we sedated you. This paints a very specific and terrifying picture." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the small room. "Have you been losing hair recently? Have you felt numbness or tingling in your fingertips and toes? Have you had unexplained abdominal pain or headaches that feel like they are burning?" My breath hitched. Yes, all of it. For the last 6 months I had been shedding clumps of hair in the shower. I had dropped coffee cups because my fingers suddenly went numb. I had told my mother about the stomach cramps, and she had told me to stop eating gluten. I thought it was burnout. I thought it was stress from trying to please a family that hated me. Dr. Kim gripped the side of the gurney. "Tiana, you are not burnt out. You are being poisoned. These lines on your bones are a timeline. They show repeated low-dose exposure to a heavy metal toxin. Based on the density and the neurological symptoms, I suspect thallium or arsenic. Someone has been feeding you poison for months. This cake incident was not the start of the attack. It was just the moment they got impatient. They have not just been bullying you. They have been slowly, methodically killing you from the inside out." The room went silent save for the hum of the computer. The realization washed over me cold and suffocating. The special green juices my mother made me every Sunday. The protein shakes. Connor insisted I try. The way Jasmine always watched me eat with that tight, expectant smile. They were not just mean, they were murderers. And I had been swallowing their weapon with a smile. I stared at Dr. Kim, my brain struggling to process the impossible. Poison. The word felt heavy, alien, something that belonged in a Victorian novel, not in my life. But then the memories came flooding back, each one a puzzle piece clicking into a horrific picture. I remembered the Sunday brunches at my parents' estate. For the last 6 months, my mother Vivian had insisted on making me her special green detox juice. "You look tired, Tiana," she would say, her voice dripping with fake concern as she handed me the glass. "Drink this. It is full of antioxidants. It will help your skin." I remembered how bitter it tasted, metallic and sharp, but I drank it every time because I was desperate for her approval. I remembered the nights I spent curled on my bathroom floor, clutching my stomach as cramps tore through me, thinking I had developed a sudden intolerance to kale. I touched my hair, or what was left of it. I had been losing handfuls in the shower, clogging the drain with dark clumps. Jasmine had laughed about it. "Maybe you are going bald from being so boring," she had sneered. I thought it was stress. I thought my body was failing me because I wasn't strong enough. But it wasn't weakness, it was arsenic. My hands started to tremble, a violent shaking that rattled the bed rails. The numbness in my fingertips, the pins and needles that woke me up at night, the way my legs sometimes gave out for no reason. It all made sense. They were killing me. My own mother was blending poison into my breakfast and watching me drink it with a smile. Dr. Kim saw the realization dawn on my face. He didn't offer false comfort. He turned to the nurse, his voice hard and professional. "Call the police. This is a code gray situation. We have a confirmed case of intentional poisoning. I want this room locked down. No visitors, especially not family." "No," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "If you call the police, my father will destroy you. He knows everyone. He will say I am crazy. He will say I did this to myself." Dr. Kim stopped. He walked back to the bed and took my shaking hand in his. His grip was warm and solid, an anchor in the storm. "Let him try, Tiana. I have the X-rays. I have the blood work. Science does not lie, and neither do I. This is not a domestic dispute anymore. This is attempted murder. If I let you walk out of here, you will be dead within a month. Do you understand me?" They are not going to stop. They missed with the poison, so they tried with the cake. Next time, they won't miss. Tears spilled from my good eye, hot and stinging. The betrayal was a physical weight crushing my chest. My mother, my sister, my father who watched me bleed and checked his watch, they didn't just hate me, they wanted me erased. "Do it," I said, my voice barely a whisper but steady. "Call them. Burn it all down." Dr. Kim nodded, a fierce look of respect in his eyes. He pulled out his phone and dialed. I lay back against the pillow, listening to him report my family for trying to kill me. For the first time in 29 years, someone was finally fighting for me. And for the first time, I was ready to fight back. Detective Miller walked into the room with the quiet heaviness of a man who had seen too much evil to be surprised anymore. He was a veteran officer with gray stubble and a notebook that looked like it had survived a war. He pulled up a metal chair beside my hospital bed, the legs scraping against the linoleum with a harsh sound that made me flinch. "I want you to tell me everything, Tiana," he said, his voice gravelly but patient. "Start from the beginning and do not leave anything out." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words died in my throat. A lifetime of conditioning clamped down on my tongue like a physical gag. My mother's voice whispered in my ear, telling me that family business stays in the family. My father's stern glare warned me that ruining his reputation would be the ultimate sin. I looked at the detective's pen poised over the paper, and I felt like a traitor. If I spoke, I would destroy them. I would send my sister to prison. I would ruin my parents' careers. Could I really do that? Was I really that selfish? Then I closed my eyes, and the memory played behind my eyelids in high definition. I saw the candlelight flickering on the cake. I saw Connor's bored, cold stare, but mostly I saw Jasmine. I saw the split second before she slammed my head down. She was not just being mean, she was euphoric. She was smiling with a genuine, twisted delight. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed hurting me. And she had enjoyed watching me drink that green poison every Sunday, knowing it was killing me slowly. That was not a sister. That was a predator, playing with her food. The fear in my chest hardened into something cold and sharp. They did not love me. They did not even like me. To them, I was just an insurance policy they were trying to cash out. If I did not speak now, the next time I saw Detective Miller would be when he was standing over my autopsy table. I took a deep breath, the air whistling through my broken nose. It was not an accident. I said, my voice trembling at first, before gaining strength. My sister Jasmine. O'Connor attacked me. She deliberately slammed my face into a cake that she knew contained a hard object. She did it to cause severe bodily harm. Miller started writing, his pen scratching rhythmically across the page. I did not stop there. I told him about the diamond ring lodged in my sinus. I told him about the laughter, and then I told him the rest. For the last 6 months, my mother, Vivian Washington, has been preparing drinks for me every week. I continued, the words tasting like ash. She called them detox juices. She insisted I drink them in front of her. Every time I did, I got sick. My hair started falling out. My hands went numb. I think she has been poisoning me with arsenic or thallium, I think my entire family is trying to murder me." The detective stopped writing. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and grim determination. He clicked his pen shut and stood up. "We are going to get a warrant, Tiana. We are going to test those juices. And we are going to get that ring out of your head and into an evidence locker. You just gave us everything we need. You are safe now." As he walked out to make the call, I stared at the ceiling. I had just signed my family's death warrant. And for the first time in 29 years, I did not feel guilty. I felt alive. The door to my hospital room slid open with a hiss that sounded like a warning. Dr. Kim returned, but this time he was not alone. Two uniformed officers flanked him, their hands resting near their belts, their expressions unreadable. In the doctor's hand was a single sheet of paper that trembled slightly, betraying the professional calm he was trying to maintain. He walked to the side of my bed and looked at me with an intensity that made the air in the room feel heavy and thin. "Tiana, the toxicology screen came back from the lab." He said, his voice low and devoid of any fluctuation. "We tested for a broad spectrum of heavy metals and toxins. We found arsenic." The word hung in the air, clinical and cold. Arsenic. It was the stuff of old mystery novels, not something that should be coursing through the veins of a 29-year-old accountant in Atlanta. Dr. Kim held up the paper. "The levels in your blood are not just elevated, they are catastrophic. A normal safe level of arsenic in the human body is less than 10 micrograms per liter. Your results show 500. You have 50 times the safe limit circulating in your system right now. It is a miracle your kidneys have not shut down. It is a miracle you are even awake." I stared at the numbers on the page, the black ink blurring into a smudge of terrifying reality. 50 times. My mother had not just been making me sick. She had been saturating me with poison. Every Sunday she would hand me that glass of green sludge, smile, her warm, motherly smile, and watch me swallow death. She would ask if I liked it. She would ask if I felt better. And all the while she knew. She knew she was turning my body into a toxic waste dump. The nausea that rolled through me now had nothing to do with the concussion. It was the sickness of realizing that the woman who gave me life had spent the last 6 months trying to take it back. Detective Miller stepped forward, his badge catching the harsh overhead light. "Based on this medical evidence, we have probable cause to believe there is an active and ongoing threat to your life," he stated formally. "We are issuing an immediate investigation order. This is no longer a domestic dispute or a simple assault. This is attempted homicide. Effective immediately, you are being placed under victim protection." He turned to the uniformed officers. "I want a guard posted at this door 24 hours a day. No one comes in unless they are vetted medical staff. No flowers, no gifts, no food from outside. And absolutely no family members. If Marcus or Vivian Washington show up, they are to be detained immediately for questioning. Do you understand?" The officers nodded and moved to take their positions outside the glass doors. I watched them go, the reality of my situation settling in like a stone in my gut. I was a prisoner in a hospital room guarded by police, hiding from the people who were supposed to be my safety net. My father, the respected surgeon. My mother, the pillar of the church. My sister, the social media star. To the world, they were the picture of black excellence. To the police, they were now prime suspects in a murder investigation. And to me, they were strangers who had worn the masks of my family for 29 years. I lay back against the pillows, the beep of the monitor the only sound in the room, and realized that for the first time in my life, the safest place for me was behind a wall of armed guards, away from the people who shared my blood. The morning sun had barely begun to warm the sterile hospital room when the illusion of safety was shattered. I had spent the night drifting in and out of a medicated sleep, the police guard outside my door providing the only comfort I had known in years. But money and influence have a way of bypassing barriers, and the Washington family had plenty of both. The family lawyer must have alerted them the second the investigation was filed, because they did not call or ask for permission. They simply invaded. The heavy door swung open with a violence that made the wall shudder. My mother, Vivian Washington, marched in first. She was not wearing the worried face of a parent whose child was in the trauma unit. She was wearing her war paint, a pristine designer suit, and a scowl that could curdle milk. Behind her, my father, Dr. Marcus Washington, looked annoyed, checking his watch as if this were a tedious board meeting. And Jasmine. My sister stood there in oversized sunglasses, looking bored, tapping away on her phone, as if she were waiting for a table at brunch, not standing at the foot of the bed where her victim lay broken. Before I could even speak, Vivian lunged at me. Her hand was raised high, her palm open and aimed directly at my shattered face. I flinched, bracing for the impact, too weak to defend myself. But the blow never landed. A hand shot out from the side, catching my mother's wrist in a grip of iron. It was Dr. Kim. He had been checking my charts and he moved with a speed that blurred the air. He held her arm away from me, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. "Do not touch her, doctor," Kim said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are in my hospital, Mrs. Washington, and I will have you removed in handcuffs if you raise a hand to my patient again." Vivian ripped her arm free, her chest heaving with indignation. She did not look at the doctor. She glared at me with a hatred so pure it burned. "You ungrateful little wretch!" she screamed, her voice shrill enough to peel the paint. "How dare you? How dare you call the police on your own sister? Are you out of your mind? You are going to send Jasmine to jail over a birthday prank." A prank. I looked at Jasmine. She pulled down her sunglasses, rolling her eyes. "Seriously, Tiana," she drawled, her voice dripping with condensation. "It was just a cake. You are acting like I shot you." Everyone was laughing. "You just have to be the center of attention, do not you? You always have to ruin everything with your drama." "Mom is right. You are pathetic." My father stepped forward, smoothing his tie. "Tiana, drop this nonsense immediately," he commanded, using the tone he reserved for insubordinate nurses. "We have the lawyers drafting a retraction. You will sign it, tell the police you were confused by the concussion, and we can all go home. This is embarrassing the family. Do you have any idea what this will do to my practice if it gets out?" I stared at them, the three people who were supposed to love me. My face was held together by stitches and hope. My blood was poisoned, and all they cared about was a lawsuit. The last shred of hope I had held on to finally died. They were not here to save me. They were here to silence me. Jasmine looked at the police officer stationed by the door, then back at me, and in the blink of an eye, her demeanor shifted. The bored, arrogant socialite vanished. In her place stood a trembling, concerned sister, her lower lip quivering with practiced perfection. She let out a choked sob that sounded heartbreakingly real if you did not know her better. "Oh, officer, please do not listen to her," she wailed, burying her face in her hands. "My poor sister is not well. She has been struggling with her mental health for years. She is having a psychotic break. We have been trying to get her help, but she refuses to take her medication." I watched in disbelief as she spun a web of lies so thick it threatened to choke me. Jasmine looked up, her eyes wide and pleading mascara perfectly intact despite the performance. "She did this to herself," she insisted, pointing a shaking finger at my battered face. "She threw herself into the wall at the party. I tried to stop her. I tried to calm her down, but she just started screaming that she was going to ruin my reputation. She smashed her own face against the plaster and then dove into the cake to make a scene. She is obsessed with destroying me because she is jealous. It is a sickness." The audacity was breathtaking. She was rewriting reality in real time, turning her assault into my self-harm. She was painting me as the villain in my own tragedy. Behind her, Connor had raised his phone again. He was not filming the floor or the wall. He was filming the police officer and Dr. Kim, the red recording light steady and unblinking. He held the device with the steady hand of a predator, his voice smooth and projecting just enough for the microphone to pick up every word. "I am documenting this for our legal counsel," Connor announced, his tone dripping with entitlement. "You are holding my wife and in-laws here against their will. This is unlawful detention. You have no grounds to keep us in this room. My sister-in-law is clearly in a state of delirium and making false accusations. If you do not let us leave right now, I will have the hospital slapped with a lawsuit for false imprisonment so fast your heads will spin. I know the board of directors personally. Do you really want to lose your medical license over the ramblings of a psychiatric patient? He moved the camera to pan over my face, violating my privacy one more time. Look at her, he narrated for his invisible audience, clearly disturbed. Self-inflicted wounds used to manipulate the authorities. This is what we have to deal with. We are the victims here. This is harassment of a prominent family based on zero evidence. The room felt like it was shrinking. Their voices overlapped a cacophony of lies and threats designed to drown out the truth. Jasmine continued her fake sobbing, grabbing my mother's hand for support, while Connor narrated his legal thriller. They were a unified front, a wall of money and influence crashing down on me. For a moment, I felt the old panic rising. They were so loud, so confident. Maybe they would win. Maybe their version of the truth would become the only one that mattered. But then I felt the phantom pressure of the diamond that had been wedged in my skull, and the anger returned hotter than before. They could lie to the camera, but they could not lie to the X-ray. Enough. The word did not come out as a scream. It was a whisper, cold and jagged, like the shards of bone sitting in my eye socket. It sliced through the cacophony of their lies instantly. The room fell silent. Jasmine froze mid-sob, her hands still covering her face. Connor lowered his phone slightly, his brow furrowing in confusion. My mother stopped her tirade, her mouth hanging open in shock. For 29 years, I had been the silent daughter, the doormat, the punching bag. They had never heard me speak like this. "Get out," I said, my voice gaining strength, fueled by the arsenic burning in my veins. "Get out of my room, get out of this hospital, or I will ask Detective Miller to come back in here and I will show him the X-ray." Jasmine dropped her hands, her expression shifting from fake sorrow to genuine sneering contempt. "You are bluffing," she spat. "You do not have anything. You are just trying to scare us. Go ahead. Call the police. Tell them your little fairy tale. They will see you are crazy." I looked her dead in the eye, ignoring the throbbing pain in my own face. "I am not talking about the poison, Jasmine. I am talking about your engagement ring. The custom 3-carat princess cut diamond that Connor spent his bonus on. The one you never take off." Jasmine instinctively looked down at her left hand. Her ring finger was bare. A flicker of genuine confusion crossed her face, followed immediately by a dawn of absolute terror. "It snapped off when you smashed my face into the table," I said, savoring the way her skin turned the color of ash. "It did not fall on the floor. It traveled through my nasal cartilage and is currently lodged in my ethmoid sinus. Dr. Kim calls it a ballistic foreign object. It is embedded in my skull, Jasmine. And when they surgically remove it, it is going into an evidence bag. There is no way to explain that away. You cannot claim I did that to myself, unless you want to tell a jury that I stole your ring and shoved it up my nose before throwing myself at a wall." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Connor looked at Jasmine, then at her empty finger, and his face went pale. He knew. He knew that ring was traceable. He knew it was physical, irrefutable proof of the violence of the impact. The legal narrative he had been spinning just seconds ago evaporated into thin air. There was no spinning a diamond bullet. My father Marcus was the first to recover. He did not look at my injury. He looked at me with a cold, hard loathing. "You are making a mistake, Tiana," he said, his voice low and trembling with suppressed rage. "You are declaring war on your own family. If you do this, if you pursue this, you are on your own." "I am already on the own," I replied. "I have been on my own since I was 5 years old." My mother stepped forward, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Fine, if that is how you want it. But remember this, we pay for your apartment. We co-signed your car. You are still on the family health insurance plan. If you do not drop this by noon, I am cutting you off. I will cancel the cards. I will revoke the insurance. You will be homeless and bankrupt before you even get out of this bed. Do you hear me? You will have nothing. I pointed a shaking finger at the door. Get out. They turned and fled, a retreating army defeated by a single piece of jewelry. Jasmine looked back, once her eyes wide with fear, clutching her empty hand to her chest. They slammed the heavy door behind them, leaving me in the silence. They thought they had just played their trump card with the money. They did not realize they had just set me free. They had threatened me with poverty, but they forgot one thing. I was a forensic accountant, and I knew exactly where the bodies were buried. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing out the noise of the corridor and the lingering stench of my family's perfume. For a moment, I just lay there in the silence, listening to the hum of the air conditioning and the throb of my own pulse. My mother's threat echoed in my mind. She was going to cut me off. She was going to bankrupt me. She thought money was the leash that kept me obedient, the collar that would drag me back to her feet. She had forgotten one crucial detail. I was not just Tiana the disappointment. I was Tiana the senior forensic accountant. I spent my days hunting down assets for the FBI and exposing corporate fraud for Fortune 500 companies. I could trace a single dollar through shell companies in the Caymans. My parents thought they held the purse strings, but they had no idea I knew how to untie the knots. I reached for the call button, wincing as the movement pulled at the IV line in my arm. When the nurse arrived, a kind woman named Sarah, who had watched my family storm out with a look of pure disgust, I did not ask for pain medication. I asked for a laptop. She hesitated at first, citing hospital policy and my need for rest, but something in my remaining eye must have convinced her. She saw the desperation, or perhaps the cold determination that had replaced my fear. She left and returned 5 minutes later with her personal MacBook. I thanked her, waited for the door to close, and opened the lid. The glow of the screen felt like a weapon in my hands. I cracked my knuckles, ignoring the tremors that still lingered from the poison. I navigated to my firm's secure portal. It was a breach of protocol to access these systems for personal use, but I was past caring about employee handbooks. I was fighting for my life. I typed in my credentials, the familiar rhythm of the keystrokes calming my racing heart. Two-factor authentication pinged my phone. I was in. To the uninitiated, the screen was just a series of databases and search bars. To me, it was a map of human behavior. Money always leaves a trail. It tells you who people are, what they value, and most importantly, what they are desperate to hide. I bypassed the standard consumer credit checks. Those were for amateurs. I went straight to the deep dive resources, the national property lien records, the civil court filings, and the high-level credit repositories that updated in real time. I started with the man who had looked at me with such cold indifference while I bled. Connor. Oh, Connor. My brother-in-law presented himself as a master of the universe, a hedge fund manager who turned everything he touched into gold. He drove a Bentley. He wore Italian suits. He spoke in buzzwords about yield and liquidity. I typed his social security number into the search field. I had memorized it 3 years ago when he asked me to look over a tax form, a mistake he was about to regret. The system word processing the query. I felt a surge of adrenaline that dulled the pain in my face. This was my domain. In this digital space, I was not the victim. I was the predator. I opened a second tab and typed in my sister's name. Jasmine Washington O'Connor. The golden child. The influencer. The woman who needed 3 carats of diamond to feel loved. I queued up a search for her credit history, her bank balances, and any LLCs registered in her name. I was going to strip them bare, layer by layer, until I found the rot I knew was hiding underneath their designer clothes. The progress bar loaded, inching toward 100%. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to see. My mother had threatened to ruin me financially. I was about to find out if she even had the money to make good on that threat. The screen flashed, and the results populated. I leaned in my good eye, scanning the columns of numbers, and felt the corners of my mouth twitch upward. The spreadsheet staring back at me was not a portfolio of wealth, it was an autopsy of a financial corpse. Connor. Oh, Connor, the man who sneered at my salary, the man my parents paraded around the country club as the epitome of success, was broke. Not just cash poor, he was destitute. The O'Connor Capital Group, his flagship hedge fund, had not traded a single stock in 14 months. It was a ghost ship. The regulatory filings showed a quiet dissolution a year ago, buried under a mountain of non-disclosure agreements and settled lawsuits for mismanagement of funds. He had been pretending to go to work every day for a year, likely sitting in a rented office playing video games, while his world burned down around him. I dug deeper, pulling his personal liability report. It was bleeding red ink. There were the standard debts, the maxed-out platinum cards, the lease payments on the Bentley that were 3 months behind. But then I saw the big one. A judgment lien from a private holding company in Nevada for $5 million. I ran a quick check on the holding company. It was a shell entity known in law enforcement circles as a front for organized crime. Connor did not owe money to a bank. He owed money to sharks who broke legs for a living. He was not just in debt. He was a dead man walking. I switched tabs to the property records for their mansion in Buckhead. My mother loved to brag about that house. She called it the jewel of the neighborhood. The title search told a different story. It was leveraged to the hilt. There was a primary mortgage, a secondary home equity line of credit that was fully drawn, and a third lien taken out just 2 weeks ago with a predatory interest rate. They had mortgaged the walls around them 3 times over. They owned nothing. They were squatters in their own lives, drowning in debt and desperation. The picture was coming into focus. The cruelty at the party, the desperation to silence me, the threats to cut me off financially. It was all projection. They did not have any money to cut me off from. They were terrified because the house of cards was falling and they needed a way out. Connor needed $5 million fast, or he was going to end up in a landfill. And suddenly the reason for trying to kill me started to take shape. They did not just want me dead because they hated me. They wanted me dead because I was worth more as a corpse than as a sister. The financial ruin explained the urgency, but it did not explain the mechanism. I needed to know how they planned to turn my death into their payday. I opened the search bar again, my fingers flying across the keys. It was time to look at Jasmine. I minimized the window containing Connor's financial autopsy and opened a new query. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second, a cold dread settling in my stomach. I typed in my own social security number. As a forensic accountant, I monitored my credit religiously. I had an 800 credit score, 0 debt, and a modest savings account that I had scraped together despite my family's constant demands. But looking at the wreckage of my brother-in-law's finances, I suddenly felt exposed. If they were desperate enough to kill me, what else had they done? The report loaded and the air left my lungs in a sharp hiss. My pristine credit score was gone. In its place was a number that signaled financial ruin. The screen was filled with active accounts I had never opened. There were 5 of them. They were not standard consumer cards. They were the ultra-exclusive black cards, the kind that required invitation and carried annual fees higher than my car payments. The kind of cards Jasmine flashed at brunch to prove she was better than everyone else. I clicked on the transaction histories, my eyes widening in horror. The billing address was a private post office box in Buckhead, registered to a shell company I recognized from my earlier search on Jasmine. She had stolen my identity. She had taken my social security number, likely from the files in my father's home office, and used my good name to fund the lifestyle she could not afford. The itemized list was a catalog of her narcissism. There were charges for the Chanel bag she had mocked me for not having. There were charges for the first-class trip to Paris she took last spring, the one where she posted photos captioned, "Self-made heiress." There were charges for the very dress she was wearing when she smashed my face into the cake. The total outstanding balance stared back at me in bold red numbers. $200,000. She had racked up nearly $250,000 in debt in my name. She was not just killing me physically with poison, she was systematically destroying my future. If I survived the arsenic, I would wake up to bankruptcy. I would lose my CPA license. I would lose my ability to work in finance. She had ensured that whether I lived or died, my life as I knew it was over. The betrayal was so absolute it was almost blinding. I remembered every time she called me cheap for driving a used car. I remembered her sneering at my off-the-rack suits. All the while she was wearing clothes bought with my credit, drinking champagne charged to my future, and laughing at me for being responsible. She wasn't just a thief, she was a parasite. She had hollowed me out financially, just as she was trying to hollow me out physically. But as I scrolled to the bottom of the credit inquiries section, I saw something that made the credit card fraud look like petty theft. It was an inquiry from a life insurance underwriter. It was dated 8 months ago. My blood ran cold. Identity theft was a crime of greed, but life insurance fraud was a crime of blood. I clicked on the reference number, my hand shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. This was the final piece of the puzzle. This was the reason they couldn't just let me go bankrupt. This was why I had to die. I clicked on the digital policy document, and the screen filled with the fine print of my death warrant. It was a term life insurance policy for $10 million. The policyholder was listed as Tiana Washington, but the signature at the bottom was a forgery so blatant it was insulting. The loops were too wide, the slant too aggressive. It was Jasmine's handwriting trying to masquerade as mine. But the most chilling part was the beneficiary line. It did not list my parents. It did not list a charity. It listed the J&C Trust. A quick cross-reference confirmed my suspicion. J&C stood for Jasmine and Connor. They had set up a trust specifically to catch the windfall from my murder. I scrolled down to the riders and clauses, my forensic eye scanning for the payout triggers. And there it was, buried on page 14, clause 7b. Accidental death indemnity. The policy paid out double, a staggering $20 million if the insured died as a result of an accident within the home. It was the jackpot clause. It was the reason for everything. Suddenly, the last 6 months replayed in my mind like a horror movie reel. The time I fell down the main staircase because someone had spilled oil on the top step. My mother had called me clumsy and insisted I stay home from work to rest. That was attempt number 1. Then the car accident. The brakes on my sedan had failed on a winding road. The mechanic said the lines looked cut, but my father had silenced him with a payoff and told me it was just wear and tear. That was attempt number 2. And the poison. The slow, methodical introduction of arsenic into my system was not just cruelty, it was a fail-safe. If I died of organ failure at home with no obvious signs of foul play, a lazy coroner might rule it natural causes or an accidental overdose. But the arsenic was taking too long. My body was fighting back too hard. Connor's debt was due. The sharks were circling. They needed the money now. So they staged the birthday party. The cake smash was not a prank, it was an execution. They hoped the impact would kill me instantly, a freak accident where the birthday girl tripped and hit her head. Or maybe they hoped the diamond lodged in my brain would cause a fatal hemorrhage later that night. Either way, I would die at home surrounded by family, a tragic accident that would trigger the double indemnity clause. $20 million would clear Connor's debt, pay off Jasmine's fraud, and leave them with enough cash to keep pretending they were royalty. My hands were ice cold as I closed the laptop. The betrayal was absolute. They had monetized my life. They had turned my existence into a stock option they were waiting to exercise. I looked at the IV drip in my arm, realizing how close I had come to being a line item on their balance sheet. But they had made a mistake. They thought I was just a victim. They forgot I was an auditor. And I had just found the discrepancy that was going to send them all to prison. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the business card Detective Miller had left on my bedside table. It rang once before he picked up his voice gruff and alert. I did not waste time with pleasantries. Check your secure email. Detective? I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I just sent you a zip file. It contains a forensic audit of Connor O'Connor's hedge fund, proof of identity theft committed by my sister, and a fraudulent life insurance policy taken out in my name. I heard the click of a mouse and the tapping of keys on the other end. There was a long silence broken only by a sharp intake of breath. Miller swore softly. This is Miss Washington. This is incredible. You did all this from a hospital bed. I am a forensic accountant, detective, I replied. Following the money is what I do. And the money says my brother-in-law owes $5 million to a loan shark in Nevada, and my sister needs $20 million to keep living like a Kardashian. That insurance policy is the motive. We have enough here for an immediate arrest warrant, Miller said, the urgency in his voice palpable. Attempted murder, insurance fraud, identity theft. I can have a squad car at your parents' estate in 20 minutes. We will pick them up tonight. No, I said sharply. Do not arrest them yet. There was a pause. Tiana, these people are dangerous. They tried to kill you. We need to get them off the street. If you arrest them tonight, my father will have them out on bail by morning. I argued, my mind working 3 steps ahead. Dr. Marcus Washington is a pillar of this community. He has dinner with judges. He plays golf with the district attorney. He will spin this. He will say I am mentally unstable, that I hacked their accounts, that this is a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. He will use his money and his reputation to bury the truth before it ever sees a jury. So what do you want to do? Miller asked, frustration creeping into his tone. I want to destroy their shield, I said. My parents care about one thing more than money, and that is their image. They protect Jasmine and Connor because it protects the brand of the perfect Washington family. I need to break that brand. I need to expose them in a way that my father cannot fix with a check. I took a deep breath, the plan forming in my mind with crystal clarity. This Saturday is the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala at the Ritz-Carlton. My father is the keynote speaker. Connor is supposed to receive an award for philanthropy, which is ironic considering he is bankrupt. Everyone who matters in Atlanta will be there. The press, the donors, the medical board. I want to do it there. You want to entrap them at a black tie event? Miller asked incredulously. I want to catch them when they feel safest, I replied. I will agree to drop the charges. I will play the part of the forgiving, clumsy daughter. I will lure them onto that stage. And then I will hand you the evidence in front of 500 witnesses. When the handcuffs go on, I want it to be live-streamed. I want there to be no doubt, no spin, and no way out. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Miller weighing the risks. Finally, he exhaled. Okay, we will have plainclothes officers in the ballroom, but Tiana, if this goes sideways, if they suspect anything. They won't, I said, looking at my reflection in the darkened window. They think I am weak. They think I am stupid. They have no idea I am the one holding the match. I took a deep breath, deliberately shallowing my breathing to sound weaker and more fragile. I reached for the phone, my fingers hovering over the contact labeled Mother. This was the most dangerous performance of my life. If my voice wavered, or if my tone held even a hint of the rage burning inside me, the trap would fail. I needed to be the Tiana they knew, the Tiana they had molded, weak and dependent and desperate for approval. I dialed. The phone rang 4 times. She was making me wait, a power move she had perfected since I was a child. Finally, she picked up. Her voice was ice cold and sharp enough to cut glass. What is it now, Tiana? If you are calling to beg for money, save your breath. Your father is already speaking to the estate lawyers about writing you out of the will completely. I let a sob escape, a jagged, pathetic sound that scraped my throat. Mom, I choked out. Mom, please do not hang up. I messed up. I messed up so bad. There was silence on the other end. She was listening, gauging my desperation. I do not know what happened. I continued, letting the words tumble out in a frantic, tearful rush. Dr. Kim gave me these painkillers. They were so strong. I was hallucinating, Mom. I thought I saw things on the X-ray that were not there. I was paranoid. I scared myself. I paused, waiting. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. She was weighing the risk. Was I lying, or had their gaslighting finally worked? I want to drop the lawsuit, I whispered. I told the detective to go away. I do not want to send Jasmine to jail. She is my sister. I love her. I just want everything to go back to normal. Please, Mom, tell Dad I am sorry. The transformation was instantaneous. The ice in Vivian's voice melted into a syrupy, cloying warmth that made my skin crawl. Oh, baby, she cooed. Oh, Tiana. Thank God you finally came to your senses. I knew that was not my daughter talking yesterday. I told your father that is not our Tiana. Our Tiana would never hurt her family like that. It was those doctors, was it not? They put ideas in your head. Yes, I lied, closing my eyes against the wave of nausea. It was the doctors. They confused me. You are a good girl, she said, the praise feeling like a physical slap. You are a smart girl. You know that family is the only thing that matters. We protect each other, Tiana. That is what Washingtons do. We do not let outsiders tear us apart. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. She was forgiving me for a crime I did not commit, accepting an apology for her own daughter's attempted murder. The narcissism was breathtaking. I am so relieved, she continued, her voice light and breezy now, as if we were discussing a lunch date and not a felony investigation. I will tell Jasmine immediately. She has been so worried about you, Tiana. She has been crying all day. We all have. But this fixes everything. We can put this ugly mess behind us and pretend it never happened. Pretend it never happened. That was their motto. Sweep the blood under the rug. Paint over the cracks. Pretend the perfect family was not rotting from the inside out. I have one condition though, Mom, I said, carefully planting the hook. I want to make it right. I want to apologize properly, not just over the phone. I want to do it in front of everyone. This was the moment, the pivot. I held my breath. What do you mean? She asked, her curiosity piqued. I want to fix the reputation I damaged, I said. I want everyone to know what a loving family we really are. I knew exactly which buttons to push. My mother did not care about apologies. She cared about optics. She cared about what the neighbors whispered at the country club and what the deacon said after Sunday service. A private apology would save them from jail, but it would not save their reputation. The rumors were already swirling. I needed to offer her something she valued more than my life. I needed to offer her total public vindication. I know Dad is the keynote speaker at the Children's Hospital Charity Gala this Saturday, I said, keeping my voice soft and tremulous. It is the biggest event of the season. Everyone will be there. The board members, the donors. Connor is supposed to get that award for his charity work. Yes, Vivian said, her tone guarded. What about it? I want to come, I said. I want to stand on that stage with you and Dad and Jasmine. I want to take the microphone and tell everyone the truth. I want to tell them that I had a bad reaction to medication and that I made everything up. I want to publicly apologize to Jasmine for ruining her reputation. I want to clear her name in front of the entire city. There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. I could feel her calculating. She was picturing it. The perfect family tableau. The prodigal daughter returning to the fold humbled and shamed. The benevolent parents forgiving her. It was the ultimate victory for a narcissist. It was not just winning. It was winning while an audience applauded. That is a very big gesture, Tiana, she said slowly, trying to hide the excitement creeping into her voice. Are you sure you are up to it? You look terrible. Your face is a mess. I will wear sunglasses, I promised quickly. I will wear heavy makeup. I will tell everyone I fell down the stairs just like Dad said. I will say Jasmine tried to catch me. I will make her look like a hero, Mom. I promise. Hero. The words sealed the deal. Vivian could not resist the allure of her golden child being crowned a hero in front of 500 of Atlanta's wealthiest citizens. Well, she said, letting out a dramatic sigh as if she were doing me a favor. If you really think it will help you heal, then I suppose we can allow it. It would be good for the community to see us united. Your father has been very worried about the rumors. This would fix everything. It will fix everything. I agreed, a cold smile touching my lips. I will write a speech. I will make sure everyone knows what a wonderful sister Jasmine is. Good girl, Vivian cooed. I knew you would do the right thing eventually. You just needed a little time to cool off. I will call the event coordinator and have them add a segment to the program. We will call it a family tribute. Oh, Tiana, this is going to be beautiful. Yes, Mom, I whispered. It is going to be unforgettable. She hung up, likely already dialing Jasmine to gloat about how she had brought me to heel. She thought she had won. She thought she had bullied me back into submission with threats of poverty and abandonment. She had no idea that she had just handed me the weapon that would destroy her. She had invited the executioner to the banquet and given her a microphone. I lowered the phone and looked at the empty room. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard certainty of what had to be done. Saturday night would not be a tribute. It would be a massacre. The trap was set, and the Washington family swallowed it whole. Within hours of my phone call with my mother, the atmosphere in their mansion shifted from panic to premature celebration. I could practically smell the champagne popping from my hospital bed. They thought they had pulled off the impossible. They believed they had bullied me into submission one last time, that I was the same spineless girl who would apologize for bleeding on the rug. Jasmine and Connor were likely high-fiving over their brilliance, convinced that their charm and intimidation had saved them from life in a prison cell. They were so busy congratulating themselves on their victory that they forgot the most basic rule of warfare: never underestimate an opponent who knows your secrets. What they did not know was that my submission was a Trojan horse. Earlier that afternoon, before I called my mother, I had made a trip back to the estate. I had gone with a police escort under the pretense of retrieving my personal belongings and a dress for the gala. My mother had not been home, but the housekeeper let me in, eyeing the plainclothes officer with suspicion. While the officer waited in the hallway, I moved through the house with the efficiency of a ghost. I did not just pack clothes. I planted eyes and ears. I had spent years investigating corporate espionage, and I knew exactly where people felt comfortable enough to let their masks slip. I slipped a pinhole camera behind the spine of a book in my father's study. I stuck a listening device under the marble island in the kitchen where my mother drank her morning coffee. And most importantly, I placed a high-definition recorder inside the ventilation vent in the master suite of the guest wing where Jasmine and Connor were staying. It was high risk, but I had nothing left to lose. If they found the devices, I was dead anyway. Now back in the safety of my hospital room, I opened my laptop and pulled up the surveillance feed. The grainy black and white image flickered to life, revealing the interior of the guest suite. Jasmine was pacing back and forth, a glass of wine in her hand, her face flushed with excitement. Connor was lounging on the bed, looking smug and relaxed, the tension of the last few days evaporating like mist. "I told you she would fold," Jasmine said, taking a large gulp of wine. "Tiana is weak. She always has been. She does not have the stomach for a fight." "Did you hear her on the phone? She was crying. She actually apologized to Mom. It is pathetic." Connor laughed, a low, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. "It is not just pathetic, babe, it is profitable. Once she gets on that stage and clears our names, the insurance company will have to back off. We get the payout from the trust eventually, and my creditors get off my back. We just have to play nice for one more night. We have to look like the grieving, forgiving family. Can you handle that?" "I can handle anything if it means I get my life back," Jasmine replied, admiring her reflection in the mirror. "I will hug her. I will cry. I will tell everyone how much I love my little sister. And then, once the cameras are off and the guests are gone, we can go back to making her life miserable until she finally takes the hint and disappears for good." I watched them plotting my destruction with smiles on their faces. They were celebrating a victory that had not happened yet. They thought I was the fool, They thought I was the sacrificial lamb walking willingly to the slaughter. They had no idea that every word they spoke, every laugh, every confession was being recorded, saved, and backed up to a secure server at the police station. They were digging their own graves, one arrogant sentence at a time, and I was holding the shovel. The grainy black and white footage on my laptop screen flickered slightly as the hidden camera adjusted to the low light of the guest suite. I adjusted the headphones over my ears, pressing them tight to block out the hum of the hospital machinery. I needed to hear every breath. I needed to catch every whisper. On screen, Jasmine was pacing the room like a caged tiger, a crystal wine glass clutched in her hand. She did not look like a woman who had just been forgiven by her sister. She looked like a predator who was annoyed that her prey was still twitching. "That little bitch has the constitution of a cockroach," Jasmine spat, taking a savage gulp of the expensive red wine my father had likely decanted for them. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, a gesture so unrefined it would have made our mother faint. "Honestly, Connor, it is ridiculous. She should have been dead weeks ago. I put enough arsenic in those disgusting green juices to kill an elephant." Mom stood right there and watched her drink every single drop. We watched her hair fall out. We watched her waste away. How is she still breathing? Connor was lounging on the plush chaise by the window, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. He did not look up as he answered. "Some people are just harder to kill than others, babe. It is biology. The poison weakened her, though. That is why she went down so hard at the party. We just got unlucky with the angle. If she had hit the corner of the table an inch to the left, we would be planning a funeral right now instead of a gala appearance." Jasmine stopped pacing and turned to face him, her eyes burning with a cold, hard malice that made my blood run cold even through the screen. "I am done leaving it to chance," she hissed. "As soon as this gala is over, as soon as she stands on that stage and publicly clears our names, I am finishing it. No more cakes, no more slow poisoning. I am going to wait until she is at the top of the main staircase. I am going to wait until Mom is distracted, and then I am going to shove her so hard she breaks her neck before she even hits the first landing." She acted out the motion, shoving her hands into the empty air with a violent thrust. "We will just say she had another dizzy spell." Jasmine continued, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "We will say her vertigo came back. Who is going to question it? She is already on record saying she is confused and unstable. It will be the tragic end to a tragic week. And then we are free." Connor finally looked up from his phone, his expression deadly serious. "Just make sure you do it right this time," he warned, his voice dropping to a low growl. "And make it quick. I do not just want her dead for the peace and quiet. I have the guys from Vegas breathing down my neck. They gave me an extension, but it is running out. I need that $10 million insurance payout in the J&C Trust account before the first of the month." He stood up and walked over to Jasmine, gripping her shoulders. "If I do not have that money, they are going to start breaking my fingers, and then they are going to come for you. We need Tiana dead. We need that double indemnity clause for the accident in the home. It is 20 million or nothing. Do you understand me?" Jasmine nodded, leaning into him. "I understand," she whispered. Saturday night. We let her give her little speech. We let her play the hero. And then when the applause dies down, we kill her. I sat back in my hospital bed, my hands trembling as I hit the save button. The recording file processed and uploaded to the cloud. I had them. I had the confession. I had the motive. And I had the premeditation. They were planning to murder me in my childhood home, and they had just told the police exactly how they were going to do it. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a dazzling display of wealth and hypocrisy. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the gold leaf ceiling, casting a warm, flattering light on the 500 guests sipping champagne below. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh lilies, masking the rot that sat at the center table. My parents were in their element. My father Marcus moved through the crowd like a king, holding court, shaking hands with donors and laughing loudly at jokes that were not funny. My mother, Vivian, glided beside him in emerald silk, her hand resting possessively on his arm, a picture of devoted matriarchal grace. They looked relieved. They looked triumphant. To them, this night was not just a charity gala, it was their victory lap. I stood at the edge of the room watching them for a moment before stepping into the light. I was wearing a floor-length gown of midnight blue, chosen specifically to cover the bruises on my arms and legs. My face was a work of art, constructed by a Hollywood makeup artist I had hired specifically for this deception. Layers of color corrector and heavy foundation masked the yellow and purple bruising that bloomed across my cheekbones. The swelling had gone down enough to be hidden behind a pair of oversized designer sunglasses, which I kept firmly in place. To the casual observer, I looked like a celebrity trying to be incognito. To anyone who looked closer, I looked like a ghost painted to resemble a living woman. I forced my legs to move. Every step sent a jolt of pain through my shins, where the poison had weakened my bones. But I did not limp. I walked with the slow, deliberate grace of the repentant daughter. As I approached, my parents saw me. For a split second, I saw the fear in my mother's eyes, the question of whether I would stick to the script. Then I smiled. It was a small, broken smile, the kind that said I knew my place. Her shoulders relaxed. She rushed over to me, grabbing my hands in a grip that was tight enough to bruise. "There she is," my mother announced, her voice carrying over the chatter. "Our beautiful Tiana. She is feeling much better tonight, thank goodness. A little clumsy on the stairs as usual, but she is a trooper." I nodded, bobbing my head like a marionette. "I am so sorry for worrying everyone," I said, my voice soft and breathless. "I just wanted to be here to support Jasmine and Connor. They have done so much for the community." The guests cooed and nodded, accepting the lie without question. They saw what they wanted to see: a wealthy, beautiful family, overcoming a small, private mishap. My father clapped a hand on my shoulder, his fingers digging into my trapezius muscle, a silent warning to keep it up. He guided me through the room, showing me off. "See," he seemed to say. "She is fine. We are fine. There is no scandal here, just a loving family supporting one another." I played my part perfectly, shaking hands and murmuring apologies, accepting the pity of strangers who had no idea I was standing next to the people who wanted me dead. Jasmine materialized at my elbow like a specter in white chiffon. She smelled of expensive champagne and the cloying floral perfume she had worn since high school, a scent that used to make me feel small and unrefined, but now just smelled like sulfur. To the room, she presented the image of the concerned, doting older sister. She reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering near my temple, where the throbbing headache from the concussion still pulsed. It looked like a gesture of affection, a tender moment between siblings to be captured by the society photographers circling the room. But up close, the illusion shattered. Her fingernails, manicured to sharp red points, dug into the tender skin behind my ear, hard enough to break the surface. It was a warning. It was a reminder of who held the power, or at least who she thought held the power. She leaned in close, her cheek brushing against mine in a false embrace. Her voice was a hiss, barely audible over the hum of conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses, but every word was razor sharp. "You look like a corpse, Tiana," she whispered, her tone dripping with disgust. "But at least you cleaned up well enough to be useful. Now listen to me very carefully. You are going to go up on that stage in 5 minutes. You are going to take that microphone, and you are going to read the script I put in your purse word for word. You are going to tell these people that you have been off your medication. You are going to tell them you had a psychotic episode and that you hurt yourself in a fit of hysteria. And then you are going to thank me and Connor for saving you from yourself." She pulled back slightly, just enough to look me in the eye. Her gaze was flat and dead, devoid of any humanity. It was the same look she had given me right before she slammed my face into the table. "If you deviate from the script by even a single syllable," she continued, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly casual register. If you stutter, if you cry at the wrong time, or if you try to pull anything stupid, I promise you will regret it. We will cut you off so fast your head will spin, you will be homeless, you will be bankrupt, and trust me, accidents happen every day. Next time you won't be lucky enough to wake up in a hospital bed. Do you understand me? After tonight, if you are a good little girl, I might let you live. I might even throw you a few scraps to keep you fed. But you belong to me now. I looked at her, really looked at her for what I knew would be the last time as a free woman. I saw the arrogance that radiated off her like heat. She truly believed she had won. She believed that fear was the only currency that mattered, and that she had emptied my account. She had no idea that the sister she was threatening was already dead, killed by the arsenic and the betrayal. The woman standing in front of her was something else entirely. I was a mirror now reflecting her own sins back at her, and she was too blind to see it. I felt the weight of the hidden wire taped to my chest, the recording device that was currently transmitting her threat to a van parked 2 blocks away. I felt the phantom pressure of the diamond lodged in my sinus, the physical evidence of her brutality. And I felt a cold, dark amusement bubbling up in my chest. She was threatening me with poverty and death, unaware that in less than an hour she would be trading her couture gown for a prison jumpsuit. I reached into my clutch and touched the folded piece of paper she had given me earlier. The script. It was a masterpiece of fiction, a narrative designed to strip me of my dignity and cement her status as the saintly savior of the Washington family. It was her get-out-of-jail-free card. I turned to her, allowing a small, trembling smile to touch my lips. It was the smile of the defeated, the submissive, the broken. It was the smile she wanted to see. "Don't worry, Jasmine," I said, my voice soft and obedient. "I know exactly what I have to do. I went over the script. It is perfect. I am going to give the performance of a lifetime." Jasmine relaxed, the tension draining from her shoulders. She patted my cheek, a patronizing tap that made my skin crawl. "Good girl," she purred. "I knew you would come to your senses. Just get this over with and we can all go back to normal." I watched her turn away, scanning the room for Connor, likely to give him the signal that the sheep was ready for the slaughter. She looked so confident, so untouchable in her white dress glowing under the chandeliers. She thought normal meant her on a pedestal and me in the dirt. She didn't realize that normal was about to be redefined as a 10 by 10 cell. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lilies and betrayal. I adjusted my sunglasses, hiding the bruise that she had put there. I leaned in slightly just as she was stepping away and added one last thing. "Rest assured, dear sister," I said, my voice gaining a sudden icy clarity that made her pause and look back. "Tonight is going to be unforgettable." She frowned, a flicker of doubt crossing her face for a fraction of a second, but then Connor waved at her from across the room and the moment passed. She sneered at me one last time and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, marching toward her doom. I stood alone in the crowd, clutching the script I had no intention of reading, and waited for the announcer to call my name. The stage was set. The players were in position. And I was finally ready to drop the curtain. Connor stood behind the lucite podium, looking every inch the master of the universe he pretended to be. The stage lighting caught the sheen of his expensive silk suit and the gleam of his perfect teeth. He held the room in the palm of his hand. His voice was smooth and practiced, a rich baritone that projected warmth and sincerity to the furthest corners of the ballroom. He spoke with the rhythm of a preacher, pausing for effect, making eye contact with the wealthy donors in the front row. "We live in a world that is often quick to judge," Connor said, leaning into the microphone with a solemn expression. "We live in a world that loves a scandal more than it loves the truth. But in this family, we believe in something stronger than gossip. We believe in resilience. We believe in the unconditional bonds of blood." I stood in the shadows of the stage wing watching him. It was a performance so flawless it was almost nauseating. He was talking about love and protection while the man who broke my legs in a hypothetical insurance scam stood right there. He spoke of forgiveness as if he were the one who had been wronged. He painted a picture of a family under siege by mental illness, holding out a hand to save their drowning daughter. The audience ate it up. I could see heads nodding in agreement. They saw a noble man defending his difficult sister-in-law. They had no idea they were listening to a desperate criminal trying to secure a payout. And that is why tonight is so special. Connor continued, his voice swelling with emotion. Because tonight is about healing. It is about putting the past behind us and moving forward together. My sister-in-law has been through a terrible struggle. She has fought battles in her own mind that none of us can imagine. But she is here tonight because she is brave. She is here to speak her truth and to accept the love we have been trying to give her. He turned toward the wing where I was hiding and extended a hand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my sister Tiana. The spotlight swung through the darkness, blinding and hot. It found me, instantly pinning me against the black curtain like a specimen in a jar. The sudden brightness made my head swim, the concussion throbbing in protest. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the vertigo. I stepped out of the safety of the shadows and onto the stage. The silence that fell over the ballroom was absolute. 500 people stopped eating, stopped drinking, and stopped breathing. The only sound was the soft thud of my heels on the stage floor. They were staring at me, at the dark sunglasses that covered my eyes, at the heavy makeup that could not quite hide the gauntness of my face. They were waiting for the breakdown. They were waiting for the apology. They expected a tearful, broken woman to stumble to the microphone and beg for her family's forgiveness. I walked toward Connor. He smiled at me, a benevolent, encouraging smile that did not reach his cold, dead eyes. As I got closer, he stepped back, creating space for me at the podium. He placed a hand on my back, a gesture that looked supportive to the audience but felt like a shove to me. It was a final warning. Stick to the script, his grip said. Save us and we will let you live. I reached the podium and gripped the sides to steady my shaking hands. The microphone was right there, waiting. I looked out into the sea of expectant faces, obscured by the glare of the spotlight. Somewhere in the dark, my parents were watching, smug and assured of their victory. Somewhere, Jasmine was smirking. They were all waiting for the lie. I took a breath, leaned in, and prepared to give them the truth instead. I gripped the cold metal stand of the microphone, my knuckles turning white. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a heavy blanket of anticipation that smothered the room. 500 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, waiting for the breakdown, waiting for the tears. In the front row, I saw my mother, Vivian. She was leaning forward slightly, her hands clasped in her lap, nodding at me with a look of intense encouragement. It was the look of a puppet master urging her marionette to dance. Beside her, my father Marcus looked solemn and dignified, playing the part of the grieving patriarch to perfection. And standing just a few feet away, Connor watched me with the predatory stillness of a snake. I took a breath, inhaling the scent of expensive perfume and the lingering metallic taste of fear. I looked down at the crumpled piece of paper in my hand, the script Jasmine had written for me. The lies were printed in neat, cheerful font. I was supposed to say I was sick. I was supposed to say I was confused. I was supposed to thank them for saving me. I looked up, my gaze sweeping over the crowd until I locked eyes with Jasmine. She was standing near the stage, smiling that cruel, triumphant smile. She raised her glass to me, a silent toast to her own victory. I would like to apologize. I began, my voice echoing clearly through the massive speakers. A ripple of relief went through my family. I saw Connor's shoulders drop an inch. I saw my mother smile. They thought they had won. They thought the broken girl was back in her box, ready to be stored away until they needed to kill her again. I let the silence stretch for one beat, then two. The air in the room grew thin. I looked directly at Connor, who was starting to frown, his eyes darting between me and the audience. I apologize. I repeated, my voice hardening into steel, losing all traces of the tremble I had feigned earlier. I apologize for not doing this sooner. The smile froze on Jasmine's face. My mother's eyes widened in sudden confusion. Connor took a step toward me, his hand reaching out as if to grab the microphone, but he was too late. I reached into the pocket of my gown and pulled out the small black remote control I had swiped from the audio-visual technician earlier that day. I did not look back at Connor. I did not flinch. I pointed the device at the massive LED screen behind me, the one that had been cycling through a heartwarming slideshow of our family vacations and smiling portraits. I pressed the button. The image of the happy Washington family vanished instantly. The screen went black, plunging the stage into a momentary void. Then a blood-red background flared to life, bathing the entire ballroom in a harsh, sinister glow. In bold, stark white letters 10 feet tall, the words, "Criminal Dossier" appeared. Below it, the names Jasmine Washington and Connor O'Connor were listed in a font that looked like a police report. A collective gasp ripped through the audience. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. The polite murmurs of the gala died instantly, replaced by a stunned silence that was louder than any scream. The red light reflected off the crystal chandeliers, turning the elegant ballroom into a crime scene. I stood center stage, bathed in the crimson glow, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel small. I felt like Judgment Day. I pressed the button on the remote again. The red warning screen vanished, replaced by a split image that was so graphic several people in the front row audibly gasped. On the left side of the massive LED display was my toxicology report from the hospital. The bar graph was highlighted in neon yellow, showing arsenic levels sky-high above the safety line. It was undeniable scientific proof of long-term poisoning. But it was the image on the right that made the room recoil in horror. It was the X-ray of my skull. The black and white scan showed the ghostly outline of my facial bones, shattered and broken. And there, lodging deep in the center of the dark nasal cavity, was the bright star-like flare of the diamond. "That is not a tumor," my voice boomed over the speakers, cutting through the murmurs of confusion. "That is a 3-carat princess-cut diamond. It belongs to my sister Jasmine. It is currently lodged in my ethmoid sinus because she slammed my face into a table with enough force to turn her jewelry into a projectile." And the graph on the left shows the arsenic my mother has been feeding me for 6 months to weaken my bones so I would break easier. I did not give them a chance to speak. I clicked the remote again. The screen shifted to a blown-up image of a document. It was a life insurance policy. I pointed to the bottom of the screen where a shaky loop-filled signature sat above the typed name, Tiana Washington. "This is a $10 million life insurance policy taken out in my name 8 months ago." I narrated, my voice cold and clinical. "I did not sign this. My sister forged my signature. The beneficiary is not a charity. It is a private trust controlled by Jasmine and Connor. And there is a clause that doubles the payout to $20 million if I die from an accident in the family home." The murmurs in the crowd were turning into angry, shocked whispers. I could see the donors looking at my father with disgust. Connor made a move to lunge for me, but he was frozen by what happened next. I clicked the remote one final time. This time, there was no document. There was a video. The screen showed the grainy black and white footage from the hidden camera I had planted in the guest room. The sound was crisp and clear, amplified by the ballroom's concert-quality speakers. It was the voice of Connor, unmistakable and arrogant. "I need that $10 million before the first of the month." His recorded voice snarled, echoing off the gold leaf ceiling. "The sharks in Vegas are going to break my legs." Then Jasmine's voice filled the room, sending a chill down everyone's spine. "Don't worry, I will shove her so hard she breaks her neck before she even hits the first landing. We will just say her vertigo came back." The video froze on Jasmine's face, twisted in a cruel sneer. Then the audio played the final damning line, repeating it for effect. "Make it clean this time. I do not want any mistakes." The video cut to black. For a second, there was total silence. Then the room erupted. It wasn't applause, it was a collective cry of horror. People jumped out of their chairs. A woman in the back screamed. The veneer of the polite society gala shattered instantly. 500 of Atlanta's elite were staring at the stage, looking at my family not as pillars of the community, but as monsters who had been caught plotting a murder in high definition. The truth was out, and it was uglier than anyone could have imagined. The echo of Connor's recorded voice, promising to break my neck, still hung in the air when he finally snapped. The mask of the benevolent philanthropist disintegrated completely. He let out a guttural roar that sounded less like a man and more like a cornered beast. He did not look at the audience or the cameras anymore. He looked only at me. His eyes were wild with a murderous desperation. He lunged across the stage, his hands reaching out to strangle the truth right out of my throat. He wanted to destroy the microphone and silence the witness. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood my ground because I knew exactly who was standing in the shadows of the wings. Just as Connor's fingers were inches from my arm, a heavy figure tackled him from the side. It was not a security guard. It was Chief Anderson of the Atlanta Police Department, a man my father had bragged about having dinner with just last month. He had been my invited guest, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the evidence to be presented. The impact slammed Connor against the lucite podium, sending it crashing to the floor, with a deafening screech of audio feedback. The elegant flower arrangements toppled over, spilling water and lilies onto the expensive stage floor. Chief Anderson wasted no time. He twisted Connor's arm behind his back with practiced efficiency. The sound of heavy metal handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the speakers, amplified for everyone to hear. It was the sound of justice finally clamping down. "Get off me!" Connor screamed, his face pressed against the floorboards, saliva flying from his mouth. "Do you know who I am? You cannot do this. I will sue you. I will sue this entire city." "You have the right to remain silent," the chief shouted back, hauling him to his feet by the collar of his ruined tuxedo. "I suggest you start using it." At the sight of her husband in cuffs, Jasmine's composure shattered. She let out a shriek that was so high-pitched and piercing it made the guests cover their ears. It was the scream of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. Panic overtook her. She hiked up the skirt of her white chiffon gown and bolted. She shoved past a waiter, sending a tray of champagne flutes crashing to the ground. She scrambled toward the double doors at the back of the ballroom, desperate to escape the glare of the lights and the judgment of the crowd. She slammed her hands against the brass handles, pushing with all her might, but the doors did not budge. They swung open from the outside, and Detective Miller stepped through, filling the frame. He was flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He looked down at my sister, who was panting and wild-eyed, with a look of grim satisfaction. "Jasmine Washington," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, identity theft, and insurance fraud." Jasmine collapsed. She did not faint. She simply slid to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her expensive dress puddling around her like a shroud. And then there were my parents. Marcus and Vivian stood center stage, frozen in a tableau of absolute humiliation. The blood had drained from their faces, leaving them the color of old parchment. My father's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My mother, usually so poised, looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She looked at the audience, searching for a friendly face, someone who would step up and defend them. But the crowd recoiled. The donors, the board members, the friends they had cultivated for decades turned their backs. They looked at my parents with pure revulsion. The Washington dynasty had not just fallen, it had been exposed as a criminal enterprise. They stood alone in the spotlight, stripped of their power, while the flashing cameras captured every second of their ruin. The scene on the stage descended into chaos, but it was the controlled chaos of the law finally taking effect. Detective Miller's voice boomed over the sound system, drowning out Jasmine's sobbing and Connor's swearing. He read the warrants with a crisp, professional cadence that echoed off the ballroom walls. Connor. O. Connor and Jasmine Washington, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit capital murder in the first degree. You are also charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon wire fraud involving a financial institution and grand larceny. The charges hit the air like physical blows: conspiracy, murder, fraud. The words hung heavy in the room, stripping away the last remnants of the Washington family's prestige. My father could not stand it. The humiliation was too much for his ego to bear. He shook off his shock and puffed out his chest, trying to summon the authority he had wielded in operating rooms for 30 years. He marched toward Chief Anderson, his face purple with rage. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "Stop this immediately. Do you know who I am? I am Dr. Marcus Washington. I am a pillar of this foundation. This is a misunderstanding. My daughter Tiana is mentally unstable. You are arresting innocent people based on the delusions of a psychiatric patient." My mother Vivian chimed in right behind him, clinging to his arm and playing the role of the indignantly wronged matriarch. "This is a mistake," she cried shrilly. "We will call the mayor. We will have your badges for this. You cannot treat us like common criminals. We are the Washingtons." Chief Anderson did not flinch. He did not look intimidated. He looked at my parents with a cold, profound disgust that silenced the room. He stepped forward, looming over my father and blocking his path to the exit. "Save your breath, Dr. Washington," the chief said, his voice low and dangerous, like thunder rolling in the distance. "And do not bother calling the mayor. He is sitting in the third row, and he looks just as sickened by you as I am." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a second set of folded documents. He held them up so the cameras could see. "You think you are bystanders in this?" Anderson continued, his tone slicing through my parents' protests. "You are wrong. You are not going home tonight either. We have issued summons for both of you. You are being charged with accessory after the fact, specifically concealing evidence of a felony. You knew your daughter was being poisoned, and you did nothing. You knew about the assault, and you helped cover it up." But that is not all, the chief said, taking a step closer until he was nose to nose with my father. "We opened up the family medical archives. We have Tiana's records going back to when she was 10 years old. We saw the pattern, the untreated fractures, the mysterious concussions, the malnutrition markers. You have been letting Jasmine abuse her sister for 20 years, and you used your medical license to hide it. You are being charged with historical child endangerment and conspiracy to obstruct justice. You did not just fail to protect your child, doctor. You held her down while she was beaten." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as the color drained from her face. The crowd erupted into angry whispers. The secret was out. They were not just negligent, they were monsters who had sacrificed one daughter to please the other. The officers moved in, flanking my parents. My father looked at the handcuffs swinging from the officer's belt, and for the first time in his life, he looked small. He looked at me pleadingly, but I just stood there next to the screen that listed his crimes and watched the empire he built on my pain finally crumble to dust. It took 6 months for the gavel to finally fall, but when it did, the sound was sweeter than any symphony I had ever heard. The trial of the century, as the Atlanta papers called it, ended with a sentence that matched the cruelty of the crime. Jasmine and Connor stood before the judge in their orange jumpsuits, stripped of their designer clothes and their arrogance. The verdict was life in prison without the possibility of parole. I watched from the gallery as the bailiffs led them away. Jasmine looked back once, searching for a savior who was not there. She was not screaming anymore. She was silent, knowing that the only audience she would have for the rest of her life would be 4 concrete walls. My parents did not fare much better. They managed to avoid a long prison sentence by turning state's witness against their own children, a final act of selfishness that saved their freedom but destroyed their lives. The medical board stripped my father of his license before the trial even concluded, citing gross ethical violations and child endangerment. The legal fees were astronomical, draining every offshore account and hidden trust fund they had. They were forced to liquidate everything. The country club memberships, The luxury cars, the jewelry, and the status they worshipped were all gone. They are bankrupt social pariahs, now living in a small rental apartment on the outskirts of town, shunned by the very society they tried so hard to impress. I took them for everything they had left in civil court. I used the settlement money to finish what the surgeons started. My face is whole again. The reconstruction was a success, and the scars are faint, now thin white lines that serve as a map of what I survived. But I did not just rebuild my face, I rebuilt my purpose. I resigned from my old job and opened my own firm, Washington Forensic Security. I specialize in helping victims of financial abuse. I hunt down the money that abusers try to hide, and I make sure they pay what they owe. I am no longer the victim, I am the hunter. Today was a beautiful day for a drive. I put the top down on my new convertible, letting the warm Georgia sun hit my skin. I took the long way to the office, intentionally driving past the old neighborhood in Buckhead. I slowed down as I approached the heavy iron gates of my childhood home. The landscaping was overgrown, the grass knee-high and yellowing. The fountain where I used to cry was dry and filled with dead leaves. And there, planted firmly in the center of the lawn, was a massive sign that read, "Foreclosure Bank Owned." The fortress of my misery was empty and rotting, just like the legacy of the family that once lived there. I looked at the house for one heartbeat, feeling the weight of 29 years of pain finally lift off my shoulders. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. Then I shifted gears, pressed the gas, and sped away. The wind whipped through my hair as the house disappeared in my rearview mirror. I did not look back. I never would. I was too busy looking forward at the beautiful open road of my own life. This story serves as a powerful reminder that your greatest weapon is not physical strength, but your own mind and resilience. Tiana was underestimated and abused by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Yet she did not let their cruelty define her worth. She used her skills, her intelligence, and her courage to dismantle their lies and reclaim her life. It teaches us that truth will always find a way to the surface, and that standing up for yourself is the bravest thing you can ever do. You are the author of your own story. If you enjoyed watching Tiana turn the tables on her toxic family, hit that like button and subscribe for more satisfying stories of justice served.